screen one of my documentary film made by Doordarshan, Delhi Doordarshan for 30 minutes, that perhaps my works are very unknown to my students. So I want to share. Even I have not screened anywhere. I have seen the small laptop, but I'm tempting to see that screening in the big screen. This is after the presentation and interaction with Indrapramit.
Thank you, Brother. It's always a pleasure to be back in your alma mater, and I have been keeping in touch with Santiniketan over the years. I come almost every year. I don't meet most of you because I usually come during the summer break. I have 3 alma maters, and this is the first one. I mean, not including my school. So, and it is the perhaps most important one because I spent the longest time here as a student. So it's always a great pleasure to be invited back here to present my works. Now I'm going to show you, just to forewarn you, about 65 slides. And the idea is that I will cover a 20-year period. Just after I finished my studies, I had a rather long education in art. I did 5 years here, then I went to Baroda, I did 2 more years there, then I did 1 year of fellowship in Kanoria Center, and then subsequently I got a scholarship to do another post-graduation in Royal College of Art, London. So from 1982 to 1992, I was basically studying art. So the slides begin from 1992 till the very recent ones. So that covers a 20-year period. I will show a sampling of the works because I have been sort of meandering quite a bit. So if I look at what I did in Santiniketan, I hardly recognize them as my work. And you would see that even from 1992 onwards, there have been certain major shifts. And some of them will be visible to you. But I think that there is a connection that runs through all that. And for your information, I did printmaking here, then subsequently I did painting, and so there is also that change. That you will find a running, I hope that you will be able to locate it. I can sense it in my work, that there is a thread that connects this varied body of work. What that thread is, I'll give you a clue, especially to the student audience, not meant for my colleagues or my seniors and professionals, is that perhaps one interest that runs through the work is an interest in transience, in the passing of time, in, it sounds very heavy if I say in the impermanence of life. So you don't necessarily think about impermanence of life all the time when you're working. But when you actually look back and see the body of work, you realize that that perhaps is the connecting thread that connects all the works. That there is a sense of, things are really not quite as permanent as we assume them to be. Now this takes many different forms, as you will see. The other thing you will see that in my work, there is a circular motion. It doesn't really progress from one to the other and to the other and to the other. It's neither a horizontal or a vertical progression. It's more like a circular motion where the circle keeps increasing, by which I mean that there are interests that I have dealt with in the earlier body of work, and I have come back to the similar interest, maybe after a gap of 5, 6, 7, even 10 years, with a sort of increased awareness and exposure perhaps. But you kind of touch on those things repeatedly, so it doesn't really go away. So if you make trajectories like this from a center, I realize that my work goes back and touches those things, and the only thing that changes is perhaps the experience and to some extent your awareness. The third thing that I would like to mention, that you probably noticed, that from 1993-4 onwards, you will see that I consider myself as a figurative painter, but there is no human figure in my work. My 99.9% works is bereft of actual presence of the human figure. Why is it so? I kind of realized that if I actually take away the human figure from a space, the space becomes quite potent, because it is then either before something is going to happen or after something has happened. And I think those particular times, that it creates a kind of tension. So there is a human presence in the work, but no obvious representative human figures. Increasingly, I find more drawn to works in old media. I also, when I was young, tried out this, that, and everything, did quite a bit of experimentation with material media. But increasingly, I am realizing that I feel quite at home when I'm working with so-called traditional mediums like oil or watercolor. Why this is happening, I can't really speak for it. Perhaps the only reason I can understand is I'm comfortable, and maybe my temperament allows me to work with that. The other thing that I kind of intellectualize is to understand is perhaps it is also a reaction to a lot of issue-based work that I see around me, which claims that, old media is old. I don't think medias go old. Obviously, there will be new medias coming. There will be excitement about new medias, and quite rightly so. But I don't think that really means that one has to junk old media altogether and throw it over the board. There are a few other issues which I will like to elaborate on while in the process of showing you the slides. So without much ado, let me start, because it's a sizable number of works and I don't want to bore you to death. If you are bored to the death, part of the responsibility should be taken by this gentleman there who is switching off the lights, because I gave him two options and he chose this option. Yeah, can you make it full screen? Can you actually hear my normal voice? And I use the mic. Steady. Well, this is better. Okay. This is a work from 1992. It's one of the last works that I did in the Royal College, and was shown. Two works were shown in the degree show. This was one of them. It's called The Nocturne. It's obviously based on the night scene, the night life. The thing about it is about 6.5 feet tall, and it's meant for a corner. So these two pieces meet at a rectangle, and it's displayed in a corner. And I was working in drawing collages at that point. So in a way, these portions were collaged. They are all painted on other surfaces and screwed onto the surface. And that piece of canvas is shaped. And here you have another piece which is again at a right angle. So this is one right angle, and there is another right angle here. It's a bit like this, and it fits snugly into a corner. So that is to enhance a sense of perspectival recession. I like to play with this illusion of depth, because artifice and the illusion is very important in my work. I don't think I'm going to, I actually use more and more artifices. I use more the idea of window, of painting as a window rather than moving in the other direction that modernists did, of rejecting that whole idea. I think there is a lot of them still in that, and one can explore it differently. So, yeah, this is the first one. So you have an idea what kind of work I was doing in 1992. Move. Next one, please. Yeah, this is the other work, and it's called The Great Homecoming Painting. It's obviously done with a slight self-mockery. This was after spending 2 years in London, I was thinking of coming back home. So obviously my home was in Kolkata, so the rickshaws take a very big area, and there is this looming shadow of an aircraft. At that point, I was using a lot of shadows of aircraft, not aircraft themselves, but shadows. Again, something that passes very quickly, and denoted for me at that point stood for as a metaphor of impermanence or time passing. There are again collaged bits, like this is a frame which is added. There are collaged paper mache things. That's a canvas that is stuck. This is a different canvas, so it's kind of raised. So this is one surface, this is another surface. Then you have these empty frames which denoted high-rise buildings and stuff. There are all kinds of things, and it's very thickly painted. There are many layers of paint. Some of them are left. So this whole idea of revealing the process in painting was also very important to me at that point. I was looking at a lot of new expressionist work, so obviously there was a influence of that in this period. 92, I come back to Calcutta, but almost immediately I relocate to Chennai. I was living in a studio in Cholamandal Artist Village off Chennai, on the seashore, a very beautiful place. So the next few works will be from that period. Okay? Yeah, this is also quite large work, 4 pieces. So this is one flanking canvas, then another one. There's one long thin one in the middle which is receding back, so they are not on the same level. This is on one level, then it goes back like that, and it comes out again. It's like doors opening or something. This is again connected here, that is paper mache. And here I was veering almost towards abstraction, though it is not actually abstraction. If you look carefully, you will see that there are objects which I am referring to, which has a simile with organs in the body. And at that point, you know how important, I mean, this is a funny anecdote. I was this close to selling this work, and then somebody pointed out, oh, there is a WC here, so it can't be useful. So I still have the work. This is called Towards a Blue Light. This again had this idea of journey. This can be seen either as a cross or as a, again, shape of a shadow of a moving aircraft. And also, it is about the body and about doors opening and revealing other spaces. Next. It's similar in structure to the other work, with the difference that the canvases were not shaped at the top. They are rectangular shapes. At this point, I was also very consciously struggling against this whole idea of a painting which has to be flat and which has to be a square or a rectangular. I wanted to break out of this. With this youthful figure, I questioned this. And now I actually find solace in the fact that painting does come with certain restrictions, and that actually is very helpful. I mean, you can, if you want, add music to a painting, but that doesn't enhance the impact of a painting. Because I've come to realize that painting works, ultimately most visual works, if they're static images, work on a very personal one-to-one level. So it is actually a very intimate thing, your dialogue with a painting. This cannot be done in a room full of people. If you are experiencing a work, the dialogue that you have with the work is entirely between you and the work. It's a very one-to-one relationship. Unlike when a room full of people are watching a film, that then there is a certain emotion that touches everybody in that room. That rarely happens with a painting, and that is perhaps a very big difference, and that is perhaps why painting has remained a solitary activity, not only the act of painting but also viewing a work of art. But anyway, at that point I wasn't convinced about any of these, and I was really struggling to break out of this. So you have these things which are projecting out, you have all kinds of materials which are stuck on the surface to make it more rich and potent. And at that point I had a fear of white surfaces. I couldn't work on a white surface. I had to layer it, I had to dirty it, I had to make marks on it to begin. Next. Now next phase, this began in Chennai. I started working on a really impermanent material, which is corrugated cardboard cartons. These are very huge. They are almost this big. It's an opened carton of a fridge or a television. They can open up to really 9 feet, 9.5 feet length. The added advantage was that at this point, storage was becoming a problem. These can be folded up and stored. And the thing is that these are really thick 4-ply, 5-ply corrugated cardboard cartons. So you have the advantage of not only painting on the surface, you can actually remove 1 or 2 layers or 1 or 2 plies and get into it, almost like an archaeological dig. You can dig into the surface. You can also add things. Also, it has a very stiff resistant surface, so it doesn't have the bounce of a canvas. When you have a stretch canvas and you apply paint to it, you have a bounce. This doesn't have a bounce. At that point, I really enjoyed working on a surface which didn't offer me that bounce. And I did quite a lot of works I actually had 3 solo shows of only these corrugated cardboard cartons. You should have seen the face of my gallerist when I first brought them to his notice. It really fell. But I did manage to produce quite a large body of work. Very few of them are still with me, and surprisingly, they haven't really fallen to pieces, considering that corrugated cardboard carton is made of wood pulp, which is a very highly acidic material. And the only treatment that I did was to back it up with cloth and give it a layer of rice paper in the front to reinforce the surface. Apart from that, it's corrugated cardboard carton. Next, and this is called the theatre, the earlier one. This one is called the Great Nationalist Painting. This again, this whole megalomania that was being built through the 80s, which came to a culmination in the 90s. This whole idea of very obvious, on-your-face, nationalistic fervor that was drummed up by the political party. And this was displayed in a zigzag manner, like a Japanese screen, and painted with a lot of gold. So what looks like yellow is actually gold. So I wanted to add value to this material, which is essentially a waste material. I wanted to make it look very precious. And the image, I don't know if you can make out, is of 2 Kolhapuri chappals. A very, like a marker of your nationalist origin. So I kind of blew them up. They were big Kolhapuri chappals. It also has obviously something to do with movement of going away or travel. But the underpinning was again slightly mocking in tone, and that is kind of the title itself was a giveaway. The white is a paint actually, so it goes like this, it's straight. The white merges with the background. That was the idea again, that will perhaps break the rectangularity or the sharpness of the edge. Next. Yeah, painting with the same title, more or less the same scale. And here I actually dug what I was talking about. You can dig into the layers. So some of these are dug into 1 or 2 plies. Some of them are collaged on. The circle, see, this is the top layer, this is the second ply, this is the third ply. So you can actually see those layers very clearly in the work. Yep. This is another work called Transients. These are all painted between 93, 94, 95. I continued working on them till 97, on and off. But then I was also doing other large works in paper, in canvas. And this again is a edition which is a different plane than this. So if you move, what portion of this foot you see actually changes. And it's an image of a foot on a ball, or something like a ball. It can be seen also as a whole. That was the kind of ambiguity of things that I was interested in, that it could be this as well as that. Next. This is a much smaller work. It looks big, and that's the thing with slide projections. You have no control on the actual scale of work. But the yellow is actually again gold, and here it's actually drawn to reveal the corrugation of the corrugated cardboard. So it's black, gold and white with a touch of little red here. Next. Yeah. These are not canvases, these are all corrugated cardboard cartons. They are all opened up cartons of Frigidaires and televisions and stuff. So none of them are canvases. What you're seeing now, they are all actually corrugated cardboard cartons. And see, these are the folds. You see the folds? That's where they get folded. This is again a collage element. There is an actual rope which looks like a red line. It's quite big. It's almost the size of the projection. A little smaller. Yeah. And again, many layered with lots of layering, painting over, playing with marks, drips, all kinds of mark making I was really very, very keen on. So they are in some way very gestural works. Yeah. They were shown under a common title. They do have some individual titles, but the common title was Transients. So all these works can be referred to as transients. Next. Now, 1998, I jump. This is one of my first watercolors. When I was studying, whether in school or here in Santiniketan or Baroda, and then subsequently Broad College, I was mortally scared of watercolor, transparent watercolor. So the only watercolor I did was opaque gouaches. Now why was I scared? Because I come from Calcutta, which has a very long, halo tradition of watercolors. And I've seen people doing that watercolor, and I never wanted to do that. Somehow, I never responded to that watercolor. When I came here, I did try, but as you know, there is no formal teaching of techniques of watercolor here, which was, well, I thank my God for that I never learned how to do watercolor. Nobody ever taught me. This is the right way to do it, and this is not the way to do it. So in 98, my daughter was born. I was staying in by then I moved to Baroda. I was staying in a very small space. I didn't have space to do these large works, the luxury that I had in German. And I didn't have the luxury to work continuously. So my time was fragmented. I was also teaching. So I thought, let me give it a shot in a smaller scale. These are like 20 by 30 usual, your standard imperial size works. I said, let me give it a shot, a transparent watercolor, because as I said, I was mortally afraid of making a mark on a white paper. And all my images were planned while I'm painting them. Now, none of these things you could do on a watercolor. And I wanted to do watercolor retaining transparency of the color. I didn't want to do a gouache. It so happened that when you are living in a house with a newborn child, you have all kinds of paraphernalia strewn around. You find the strangest of things in the strangest of places. And those objects themselves kind of cried for attention. I started drawing them, then they sort of started appearing in the watercolors. So that is the beginning of my watercolors. Some years back I was having a show in Delhi and somebody comes and tells me, "Oh, you have a wonderful technique of watercolor." And I was just mumbling to myself, if you had known, there is no technique. It's all trial and error. And whatever is there is like half of it is, kind of groping in the dark and you chance upon. So irony is that people now treat me as, "Oh, you know watercolor," and I think, yeah. So these are from that series that started in 1998. These are all works of a very modest size of 22 by 30 inches. And I had a show where I again titled this whole body of work as Ringa Ringa Roses. Now you probably know that Ringa Ringa Roses is a nursery rhyme, but it sort of refers to Black Death, which is death by plague, which was a regular scourge in medieval Europe. Town after town will be emptied out when the plague came. And they were seen as God's wrath sent on earth. But obviously when you sing Ringa Ringa Roses and say Husha Husha, they all fall down, you don't think about people actually dying. But that is the background. So it has got a very dark, ominous background from where you built a nursery rhyme. And I thought, some of these paintings do have somewhat a dark edge, and that sort of suited it because it kind of deludes you into this rather idyllic things of transparent watercolor, pretty things in an interior space, more like a traditional still life. At this point, At this point I must also explain that I was getting very interested in the genres. Modernism has rejected the genre painting, but in the 19th century and previous to that, you find a lot of genres. There is a genre called still life, there is a genre called landscape. And I was getting quite interested in the genre of still life because it seemed that it is like a display case. When you're doing a still life, you're almost displaying things, you're arranging things, which is, to me, an artifice. And I thought that artifice is done in a seemingly effortless way. It's like Malasina's careless beauty. Or there are many examples in recent times. So it's like seemingly unconscious, but actually done with a great deal of consciousness. And it also treats the space as a box, which is like a stage. And because of certain facts of life, I was born to a father who was a theatre personality. So I grew up with theatre. So theatre has been always my, it was my first love at some point, but it became my second love when I decided to become a visual artist. So I wanted that theatricality of things, that is something is actually displayed like in a showcase, like in a window display, and done with a consciousness and presented with a seeming as if you've accidentally chanced upon it. That artifice interested me, and so I was looking at this genre of still life painting quite a lot. Next. This is called the gift, actually. There's an individual name for it. It actually came as a gift wrap, this thing, this printed thing. And I was totally fascinated with it and did quite a few works. And again, you will see that it's presented, it's on a stand. as if this curtain has been drawn to reveal this. So there is something like, here it is for your election kind of presentation, and I like that. There is something self-conscious about it, which I like. Next. Yeah, if you remember, this is actually a Vermeer curtain. So there is a reference to a Vermeer painting. Yep. This is called the genie. Genie of Aladdin is what I was thinking of. And interestingly, my approach to painting was changing. I was not scared of white space anymore. I was not hesitant of planning my work somewhat before I started, at least roughly. You can't really plan out every detail because I do give a lot of importance to the process. But I wasn't really completely starting with an empty head, just making marks. That just will not work in a medium like watercolor, because once a mark is made, a mark is made. You can overlay marks on top of that, but you can't really take it back. Next. Yeah, this was a dress that my daughter had. I was very fond of it because it allows me to play with these tones. And when the terrible post-Godra riots broke out, I actually did a series of works where this dress is lit, it's burning. I think there is one example from that. So these are all imperial, smaller than imperial kind of sizes, very modest in scale, which was difficult for me because my natural instinct is that if I do 3-4 small works, then I want to do something very large. If I do 4 watercolors, then I want to do something which will really be graphic and with lots of marks. If I draw for a little while, then I want to go for something. These contradictory strains have always existed in me, and I really had to find strategies to deal with them. So you will see how it shifts. Next. Yep. Yep. So it is almost the pendulum has swung from something which has gestural marks, some kind of a violence, some kind of layering to something which is very transparent, very delicate, almost like from a long poem to a 3-liner. Well, I tried my hand at these issue-based things also. This was for the exhibition about religious iconography. So I did some work, but I realized that that is not really something that I'm very comfortable with. So I moved away from that. This is a Hanuman image taken from a matchbox of the Hanuman baring his chest to reveal a blank space, which is superimposed or kind of layered on a body, on a male body, a very muscular, macho body. Again, you have a screen kind of thing, so which is revealing. Then you have a reference to some Swami match work. The original image came from a matchbox. Yeah. This was obviously painted at a time when there was terrific amount of social and political disturbance in the national life, and like everybody else, I was also very bothered and disturbed and concerned. and I just didn't know how to respond to it as a visual artist. So, I did works, I did posters, I joined morchas, I stood in the road, distributing handbills, worked for Sam on the paid. What any normal person would do in a situation like that. But it also, appeared in the painting, which I think is to some extent inevitable in a moment of such great social and political upheaval. But looking back, I don't think they are the best works or works I'm terribly comfortable with. Next. This is an oil. This is quite large, and this is again based on still life. And I was thinking about this Cézanne dictum that everything in nature is either a cylinder or a cone or something of a geometrical shape that apparently set off the cubist thinking. Now, true or false is debated quite passionately in sort of art historical circles. But this is something that you keep coming across in history books. And mind you, I was teaching at this point. I've been teaching continuously from 1995 onwards. So, you are also interacting with your students. You talk about these issues. So I thought I'll do a still life where I will have these objects. There was actually a pyramidal structure there, which was removed later. So this was, I think, called Cézanne still life or something like that. But it's a corner. It's again can be displayed in a corner. So some of the concerns actually remain and they come back. Next. These are from 2002-03, that period. Again, canvases, 4 canvases displayed in a zigzag, almost like a Japanese screen kind of format. Next. This one is called Magic. It's a watercolor. Next. And this is one of the work where I had that dress on fire. Actually, in 2002, the riots broke out in February, and we did a very large show involving 120 artists called Voices Against Violence in October. That started on Gandhiji's birthday on the 2nd of October. And this was displayed in that exhibition, and the situation was far from normal. We received even threats for not organizing the show, but we went ahead and we raised some money, not a great deal of money, but something like 6 lakhs, which was gifted to one NGO who were working with rebuilding houses for the riot affected. But anyway, that's the background story, and this was the context in which this work was painted. Next. Then again, like I said, you've done something where you worked with paint, you worked with softness, you worked with moods, and then you want to have something very graphic where you again bring back certain energy which you see, you think is missing from your watercolors or your oils. So this is a very large drawing where I've used graphite, that is pencil, very soft pencil, and oil stick. I don't know if you know what oil stick is. It's like a big stick, big pastel, but it's more like oil paint, and it can mix with oil paint, and you can draw with it. They're really big. They're like the size of this microphone. And I used washes of acrylic on top of that, so you get a very broken wash surfaces. So they again 4 or 5 layers that built up the image. Next. In 2004-5, I was given an opportunity to be in the United States for 6 months on Fulbright Fellowship. So I was stationed in a place called Bennington, which is in Vermont State, up north, close to the Canada border. It's a very quiet place. I was there for 3 months, had a studio apartment, so could work, and I realized that in those 3 months, well, actually I was there for 2.5 months. I was also teaching a course there, and in those 2.5 months, I produced works that would have taken me at least 6 to 8 months to do in my studio. So a large body was produced because you are going in a new country, you're encountering new culture. Even the familiar things start looking different. So I was looking very keenly at objects. The switches, for instance, turn the wrong way. You press the switch down to switch something on. It's the other way around in the United States. So everything looked kind of familiar yet very different. And I was very excited in looking at them afresh. And because I already had this interest in objects and still lives, I made a whole set of works which was subsequently shown under the title This, That and Everything. I had 3 shows, traveling shows actually, two in the United States, and then I came back and showed in Delhi. And they all had the same title, This, That and Everything. So this is part of a 1 foot by 1 foot work that I did, which was displayed in a row, like little train windows. I'll show you. I think I have a slide of how they were displayed. This is one from there. Your next please. This is another one. They're not even 1 foot. They're I think 10 inches by 10 inches. And they were painted on paper, pasted on board. So without even framing, they can go straight up on the wall. Next. 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 Is that the right pace, or I'm going too slow or too fast? Please tell me. It's okay?
It can be a little bit quicker.
It can be a little bit quicker. Next. This is how it was displayed. Next. Yeah, that's an oil that was done more or less at the same time. It's again 3 different canvases. About beds. That's another interest I have. Beds. I've done a lot of works with beds, used beds, unmade beds. Next. That's a couch. Watercolor. Next. And there I realized that I probably by then had the confidence to work on a much larger format. So I chose to do watercolors in the biggest format available, that is 60 inches by 40 inches, almost 5 feet by 3.5. Next. Yeah, so these are in that scale. Some of them, not all. This is called The Refuge. Next. This is called Manhattan Through Oriental Eyes. Next. It's called Deep Dusk 1. I had variations of this. Again, 3 large works. Next. It's called Snowy Morning. And after spending some time in Vermont, I came back to New York and Philadelphia and spent the other 3.5 months there. So some of these are actually observed reality, based on observed reality. Next. It's called The Trail. It's a 5 Japanese paper, very strong but transparent paper, where I did rubbings on the wooden floor. So these are actually rubbed. And then these images are painted. It's pencil on paper. It's the actual size is almost the same as the projected image. Next. Yeah, now I'm talking about 2007-8. Next. Yeah, so I come back to shaped canvases. This is called Daybreak at Studio. I was interested in lights. I always was, and that is coming to the fore now. And here I was dealing with artificial light, natural light, recession of space. Now this is actually a shaped canvas. It's not receding in space, but it gives that illusion of receding in space. So that is a rectangle, and this is a rhombus. Next. It's just the other way around. It's called empty studio. Now, these are based on things, but they are not exact views. So, they are not really seen through the eyes of a camera. Next. It's called the factory. It's also a very large oil with two shaped canvases. Next. Yeah, this again is more or less the same size as the projected image. It's called, again, it's another version of Studio at Daybreak. There are three canvases. There's one rectangle, there's one shape, and another rectangle. Next. It's called the harbor. It's again something I've seen in Goa, and so 2-3 things put together. They all look, they are actually multiple views of things. Next. This is also shaped canvas, it's not a distortion. Oil on canvas, 48 inches by 72 inches, that is 4 by 6. Next. This is called Deep Dusk 3. Lights, artificial lights, maps of cities seen from above, cities where almost something is waiting to happen. These have been my interest in the last few years. Next. This is again a drawing that I had a show in 2008 in Bombay. These are quite large drawings on paper called Metropolis. Next. Next. Some lot of gestural things, and I don't know, I don't have the necessary distance from these works to really talk about them. Next. Next. These are again very large watercolors, 60 by 40. This is called Desert Morning. Next. This is a very small word, almost postcard size. Next. Same with this one. Next. Next. It is these two spaces, this is kind of a light shaft in a building, and you see this whole cityscape in the distance. That's the kind of thing that I find quite interesting now. And also the process. Next. And, I think I'm saying less. Next. The mall. Next. Another version. Next. These are some very specific titles like Neem from E3. E3 was the quarter in which I was living. And the neem is obviously the neem tree outside. But then beyond that, what you see is something that you would never see from my little quarter. So, next. The pool. Even when I use photographs as references, I don't use photographs directly, I draw. So it goes through one or two stages, and I like it that way. This is based on an actual place which I photographed. But I had 3-4 photographs which were again combined in the drawing. Next. On the pleasure boat. It's got a lot of gold and black gold acrylic in the background and watercolor on top of that. So there are lots of slippages. Next. This is a very large work I did for the Commonwealth Games. They wanted a work which celebrates, and at that point, thankfully, I was working with fireworks. So this passed off as just a celebratory work. It's about 6 feet by 8 feet. It's large in the sense I've done larger works, but this is one piece. Normally when I'm working large, they are different canvases joined together, but that's actually one piece. This is a very recent work which is on show at the moment. There is an exhibition going on in Bombay called Back to School, which is showcasing some 10-12 artists who have all studied in Baroda in the decade of the 80s. So this work is part of that exhibition. It is not 40 by 30, it is 30 inches by 40 inches, yeah. Not 60 by 40. It also has gold in the background and then watercolor. Yeah. Next. Yeah, I think this is the last one. Also in the show. I think that's it. Thank you. Now I would be very interested if I will. Less than an hour.
Mic to you. Oh, waiting.
You can take this, I can speak with that.
Okay. Yes. Now that's an interactive session.
Something that is dark, that might be waiting in the wings. I'm not even all the time conscious of it, but I've been told by people that, they kind of sense that what is very joyful on the surface of it may not be so joyful once you scratch the surface. Now, that is the time that we live in, and I can't really escape that. There is always a thread dangling on your head. You can never...
Despite the fact that most of your paintings are so well illuminated. Lot of illuminations, light.
Yeah. No, but this darkness has nothing to do with physical light. It's the darkness of the soul.
But there's something gloom, something very bleak about them, despite the illuminations.
Yeah. Now, when that was pointed out, I realized that this is perhaps something that is linking with this whole idea of impermanence. It's also something that is reflective of the time that we live in, and that is something inevitable. I don't want to escape my time. But I also don't want to make anything which will remotely look fashionable or trendy. And I really want to actually keep that out. And that has been my struggle. So, it's kind of going in the opposite direction. And I really enjoy that, because a painting has so much to give. I don't really feel the need to bring anything up which is extraneous to the painting. And I can be criticized as somebody who's retrograde, who's backward looking, who's a reactionary. But I'm perfectly happy with that. So,
Charter now?
When you use the human figure, it is about a human being who is very corporeal. So it is very interesting.
it is. A bed is a corporeal thing, it's a presence where it is a receptacle of a body, your body. So see, this is beside the thing. When I was doing the bed, I was thinking of making love on that bed, and you were thinking of somebody being snatched away. This is precisely what happens to my painting. Sometimes I tell myself, I'm going to do a happy painting. Why does every modern painting has to have these angst and all this? Let me say, do a celebratory work, and it ends up with somebody seeing something like you're seeing.
But it is in a quirky way, I would say. It's not like very violent or tragic. But I
No,
would say, yeah.
it isn't. I don't want that. So, but it's strange that you are also seeing something which is tragic, and that is precisely what I'm talking about. That there is a presence which even I don't have full control on, but it seems to be hovering somewhere there. Yeah, it is there. What can I do about it? So,
It's a good thing.
I hope so.
You can paint.
Sorry?
You can paint. Nothing else.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I'm trying to do. I'm
Indrula,
also talking, yeah.
Indrula, it's a small query only. Do you consider or position yourself as a revivalist of some sort in genre painting?
No. I don't. I don't consider myself a revivalist, but I do consider myself a classicist. I do have a very classical sensibility. Now, that can be looked at as negative or positive. I really have stopped caring. But revivalist will necessarily come with a negative, it's a pejorative. Now, when you call somebody a revivalist, what am I reviving? It is all there. I'm just asking you to look at things. So I'm not really reviving anything. I am celebrating certain things. So, which I don't want to brand myself anything. I just like painting, and that's what I'm doing. Call me what you like. You want to give me Kali, call me a revivalist. You love my work, you call me something else. So ultimately it all boils down to that. You don't want me to brand myself, right? I'm not a brand. Yeah, enough, Sanjay. I know your fingers are itching. And Jhankata's film, I want to watch it.
Thinking loud, were there a little more open ends in the earlier works, which were a little more ambiguous and not specific, than the formally specific later works of the current years?
I can see what you're trying to point at. My closest critic, that is Shubha, also feels something similar, but I beg to disagree. I think there can be open-endedness even in things which are seemingly resolved, and that is an open-endedness which works far more subtly than an on-your-face open-endedness, and I'm trying to get there. Does it answer your question?
Yes.
Yeah.
Agree to disagree.
Oh, there is some more. Yes.
So, why is he showing the paintings photograph?
That is what I just apologized, এর নাম হচ্ছে দুধের শাক গলে মেটানো. I have no other way in which I can express this. That you cannot have the milk, so you have the chas. Yes, I wish I could carry my work. Yeah, I wish I could. Is it a conceptual question or is it a... Yeah. Well, ideally, I would love to show all these works in one gallery and stand there and talk, if I'm given the opportunity. I'll probably kick the bucket before that happens. But it's a question of practicality. I mean, how else do I bring the works to you? How else do I share the works with you? I mean, that opportunity might never occur. Should I wait for it? Should I die before that happens? I would rather do something which is the next best thing. Now, I know a photograph of a painting is not the same thing as a photograph, and I couldn't agree more on that count, but in a situation where I cannot show you the original work, I would rather show you a picture than showing you nothing. Does that answer your question?
No, I think it's better not to show nothing.
Okay, fair enough. He is so disappointed that you would rather not have seen this.
Seeing the original work and seeing a photograph of work is both is different. Like document.
Hey, come on, listen. When you applied here, you showed them all the original works that you've done, or you showed some photographs?
I never show the photograph.
Well, if you apply for MA, you will probably be asked to hand over a portfolio, and you are not going to give all the original work. So watch out what you say.
The next best thing is to invite him to your exhibition.
Yeah, I can describe the work.
Thank you, Indra. It was wonderful. This will be followed by one documentary film on my work. It may be a very painful for you. That one day one